by using President Clinton's example. Is there a difference, in your view, between what President Bush has done this week and what Republicans call the sort of fire sale pardons of the Clintons on their way out the White House door?
Well, look, I think most people, most Democrats, myself included at the time, said the Clinton pardons were wrong. These are wrong also, and, you know, that's just looking backward. I mean, the issue here is the Libby pardon. 64% of America, the Libby commutation is the issue. 64% of the American people said it was wrong, and they're just trying to create a diversion, as always. And let me just say one other thing, Jim. One thing, and I've spoken to Senator Leahy about this, that we're thinking of doing is calling Patrick Fitzgerald, the prosecutor, before us. You know, he's not allowed to talk about what happened before the grand jury, but he did interview the president and the vice president, not before a grand jury, and he might have some very interesting things to say. He issued a rare statement after the commutation that was very harsh in condemning it, and with good reason. The average guidelines, the Justice Department guidelines in these types of situations call for 30 to 37 months in prison. That's what Libby got. And so there are thousands and thousands of people who committed the same crime who are sitting in jail, and Scooter Libby is not. And that's just not fair. That's not equal justice before the law.
When would you like to see Patrick Fitzgerald come to Capitol Hill?
Well, you know, this would be Senator Leahy's call, but I talked to him about it yesterday, and he seemed inclined to do it. It would be very interesting, and we'd like to hear what he has to say. Obviously, he can't talk about anything that occurred in the grand jury, but there's a lot else that he might be able to tell us, because obviously, with the commutation of Libby and with no one else meeting a criminal standard, but still something terrible being done, the name of an agent being leaked, and you know, I started this, I called for the original investigation. We sure want to get more answers.
Senator Hatch, does what the president did this week, does that just sort of amount to a gift to defense lawyers all over the country who can now sort of file a Libby motion, and when they have clients that are facing similar charges and similar sentences?
No more than it's done for any other commutation. The fact of the matter is that Libby had given a lifetime of service to our country. He certainly is not a criminal. He's a person who has sacrificed throughout his lifetime to serve this country, and he certainly has been doing it over the last number of years.
He was also convicted.
He was not a threat to leave the country. He was not a threat to in any way, and it was an appropriate thing to do. And I disagree with Chuck. I think both President Clinton and President Bush had an absolute right to grant pardons if they wanted to constitutionally. The only difference between the Clinton and the Bush pardons is in the case of the FALN, the Puerto Rican terrorists, the case of Rich and Pincus Green, in the case of the two who paid $200,000 to Hugh Rodham. These two of them were fugitives from justice. 16 of them were terrorists, and the other two, it seemed to me, may have bribed their way through. And that's what really caused the problem here.
Just got about
but they both had an absolute right to grant pardons.
We've got about a minute and a half left.
You know, well, one thing, Jim, two wrongs don't make a right. That's the bottom line.
Well, and by the way, they still have constitutional rights after a pardon as well as a commutation. I think that has to be clarified.
Let's just leave it there for a second, because I want to get your thoughts on the war very, very quickly now. Pete Domenici comes out this week and calls for a further reduction in troops, end of combat missions by next spring. Senator Hatch, is the drip, drip, drip bursting the dam and becoming a steady stream of Republicans leaving the president?
Well, there's a lot of discontent with the war, but on the other hand, Pete Domenici was not calling for us to immediately leave. He's calling us to work towards withdrawing the troops over there, and I think that's different from what the president really wants, and there are a few others doing that, but on the other hand, I don't think any major Republican is calling for us to just precipitously leave there and leave that place in a mess.
Senator Schumer, you got about 20 seconds here. Your reaction to Senator Domenici this week?
Yeah. I think the dam is about to burst. Republican senators who have been holding up a reasonable change in policy on this war are going home and getting hammered by their constituents, and they're beginning to change. If not this July, by September, there will be real change forced upon the president by a bipartisan Senate.
And we're going to leave